My grandmother sold me to a stranger when I was 10. She demanded I honor the promise, until my dad ended everything. When I was 10, my parents let me fly across the ocean with my grandmother to the town where she and my dad were born, and I was excited about it for weeks, because I had only ever seen that place in photographs that had gone orange at the edges. Noel held my hand through every airport and told strangers on the plane that I was hers, and I liked being claimed like that. The town was smaller than I pictured and louder than I pictured, and everybody there knew her, and everybody there stopped her on the road to talk. On the fourth day, we went to a wedding. I did not understand what I was looking at, not at first. The bride was young, younger than the women around her, and she was crying so hard her face had gone shiny. She did not walk up to the front on her own. Two women held her under the arms and moved her forward, and she kept letting her knees go loose so she would sink down, and they kept hauling her back up, and this happened 4 or 5 times across that room. She was not being shy. She was not overwhelmed. She was trying to get out, and there was nowhere to go. I pulled on Noel's sleeve and asked her why the lady was crying, and my grandmother looked at the front of the room and said, "She is nervous. All girls cry. She will be fine by tomorrow." Around us, people were laughing. Not cruel laughing, which somehow made it worse. Just easy laughing. The way adults laugh at a child who does not want to go to the doctor. Nobody stood up. Nobody walked over. I was 10, and I knew, in the way you know a thing before you have words for it, that something bad was happening in front of 100 people who had all agreed not to call it bad. I did not say anything else. We flew home a week later, and I put it away somewhere in the back of my head, and it stayed there for 6 years. After that trip, my grandmother and I talked less and less. She would call and ask for my dad, and they would speak in their language, and he would carry the phone into another room, and when he came back, he would be quiet for the rest of the night. I thought she was just far away and getting older. I thought the quiet was about money, or about her health, or about the fact that he had left, and she had not forgiven him for it. Then I was 16, and one night in December, I came downstairs for water at almost 1 in the morning, and heard him on the phone in the dark. He was not shouting. He was doing the thing he does when he is at the end of himself, where his voice goes flat and slow, and each word gets set down separately. He kept saying, "She is a child. No, she is not going anywhere. No." I stood on the stairs with my hand on the rail until he hung up, and then I walked in and asked him what that was and who he was talking to. He did not want to tell me. I stood there and did not leave and did not stop asking, and finally he sat down at the dining table and told me the thing that turned my stomach inside out. When I was 10, on that trip, my grandmother had promised me to a man in the town. She had told his family that when I was old enough I would come back and I would marry him. His name was Ulrich. That wedding I saw, the girl with her knees going loose while everyone laughed, that was not a thing that happened to somebody else in a place I would never go back to. That was the plan for me. And for 6 years, every phone call I had been walking away from, she had been pushing him. "It is time. She is old enough. People are asking." I said, "You knew about this the whole time." He said he had told her no every single time she asked, from the first call to the last one. He had never told me because I was 10, and then 11, and then 12, and he kept believing she would let it go the way people let go of things that are impossible. She did not let it go. She got steadier about it. That is the part that is hard to explain to people. My grandmother never screamed at us. She never threatened anybody. She was patient, and she was completely certain, and she never stopped. And being on the other side of that is like standing in a river. Every time my dad said no, it came out a little more tired than the time before, and I started lying awake doing the arithmetic on how many no's a person actually has in them. When I was 12, she had sent a package. I found it in the back of the hall closet behind the winter coats. A white dress folded in plastic and a gold bracelet in a little hinged box, and I did not know what it was, and I asked my dad, and he took it out of my hands and put it somewhere I never found again. It was from Ulrich. It was for me to wear when I came. When my dad told her I would never wear it, she said I was spoiled, that girls raised here forget respect, that the man was patient and kind, and I should be grateful anybody was still willing to wait for me after all this time. She talked about me the way you talk about fruit that is starting to turn. In February, she called while my dad was at the stove, and he answered with his wet hands and put her on speaker so he could keep cooking, and he forgot I was sitting 8 feet away at the counter with my homework. She did not know I could hear her. She said, "You are being selfish. This was decided years ago. I gave my word." My dad said, "You gave your word about a 10-year-old. That means nothing." And she said, "It means everything." His family gave me gifts, they gave me money, and they gave me land for the promise. I took it in good faith, and if she does not come, I have to give all of it back, and I will be shamed in front of the whole town. Is that what you want for your mother? My dad turned the burner off. He picked the phone up and took it off speaker, but it was 6 seconds too late, and we both knew it. There it was, the whole thing, sitting out in the open air of our house. She had taken money and land for me when I was 10 years old. She had been paid. Her problem was never that her granddaughter was going to be handed to a stranger. Her problem was the receipt. My dad said, "You took money from my daughter." She said, "I did what a grandmother does. I secured her future." He said, "You sold her." She said, "Do not use ugly words. This is how it has always been done. You have forgotten where you come from." He said, "Then give it back, all of it, tonight, because she is never coming, and you are never going to ask again." She started in on him about respect and blood and the family name, and he let her run all the way to the end of it. And then he said, "You made her into a thing you could trade, and she is not a thing, and you are not going to see her." Then he hung up and blocked the number. She never once said sorry. Not that night, not later, not ever. For a few weeks, the messages kept coming through other people, cousins and neighbors passing along what she wanted said, and every message was the same message. She was the victim. She had been disrespected. She had only ever tried to help. My dad had turned his back on his own blood, and I would end up alone, and it would be his fault. Not one of those messages asked how I was. Then it went quiet, and I let myself believe it was over. I went back to school. I ate lunch with my best friend Faye and laughed about nothing, and it felt unbelievably good to be a person nothing was happening to. I told Faye a small version of it, that my grandmother had tried to set me up with some guy from her hometown, and my dad had shut it down, and Faye said that was insane, and that my dad was a legend, and I laughed a real laugh. My dad did not relax. He changed the locks on a Saturday morning and would not say why. He started getting the mail before I got home. In April, there was a thick envelope open on the dining table, and my dad sitting in front of it with both palms flat on the wood, not moving. He said, "It is from the man." Inside was a letter in handwriting I could not read, and behind it a second copy. The same same letter translated into careful English by somebody who had clearly worked at it. It was not angry. That was the problem. Ulrich wrote that he had waited 6 years, and that he understood I was young and needed to finish school, and that he did not want to rush me. He wrote that he had built a room in his house for me, and had picked the color of the walls himself. He wrote that he hoped I would come willingly, because he did not want me to be unhappy. He wrote that he prayed for me at night. I read it twice. If he had written something cruel, I could have torn it up and felt nothing at all. Instead, I was holding proof that on the other side of the ocean, there was a real person who had been told a true thing by a woman he trusted, and had spent 6 years building his life on top of it. Behind the letter was a photograph, small and a little blurry, printed on regular paper. A room, white walls, a single bed pushed against one side, thin curtains, a wooden table with a glass vase on it, and real flowers in the vase, cut and put in water by somebody's hands. On the back, in slow, careful English, 4 words: your room, waiting for you. My dad said, she lied to him too. She lied to both of you. And that reframed the entire thing for me, because I had spent months being afraid of Ulrich, and Ulrich was not the one who did this. Noel took his money and his family's land and told him a little girl would grow up and walk through his door, and he believed her, because why on earth would a grandmother lie about her own grandchild? She had used him for 6 years the same way she was using me. 3 months later, I came home from school on a Tuesday, and there was a dark blue rental parked crooked in our driveway, and my dad's car home 4 hours early, and I heard her voice through the front door before I even had my key out. My grandmother had gotten on a plane and crossed an ocean and shown up at our house without calling. She was standing by the counter with her purse still on her arm, and when she saw me, her whole face opened up and she put her arms out and said, "Look at you, so tall, come here." I did not move. I stood in the doorway with my backpack still on. Her arms came down slowly and her voice got a shade harder and she said, "What? You do not greet your grandmother? What has your father taught you?" My dad said, "She knows everything. She heard you on the phone. She knows about the money and the land." And Noel did not flinch, did not blink, did not look caught even for half a second. She pulled out a chair at our dining table and sat down in it like it belonged to her, and folded her hands and said, "Good, then we can talk honestly." She was not ashamed. That is the thing I could not get past. She reached into her purse and took out a folder with a clasp and opened it and spread it across our table. Receipts, yellowed at the corners, copies of land deeds with stamps and dates, photographs of jewelry and folded fabric laid out on somebody's bed. She tapped the pile hard with one finger and said, "If she does not go, I must return all of this. Do you know what it is worth? Do you know what I will lose?" My dad said, "Then give it back. I told you that 6 years ago." And Noel put both hands flat on the table and her voice dropped lower than I had ever heard it and she said, "I cannot. I already used it. There is nothing left to give back." Nobody said anything for a while. She had spent it. 6 years of my life had been spent, and the money was gone, and the only currency she had left to settle her debt with was me. She was not in our house because she wanted to see me. She was cornered, and she had cornered herself, and I understood right then that she would not stop, because people who cannot afford to stop do not stop. My dad told her to leave, and she left, and she did not go home. She checked into a motel 20 minutes away, and called the next day like a relative visiting for the holidays. She went to the coffee shop by my school, and showed my picture on her phone to people at the tables, and told them she was my grandmother, and that she was worried about me, and that my father would not let her see me. Faye called me from that coffee shop with her voice pitched strange. 2 days after that, my phone rang with a country code I did not recognize, and I answered it, and a man said, in slow, careful English, "Your grandmother gave me your number. I am not a bad man. I only want what was promised." It was Ulrich. She had handed my phone number to him across the ocean. I said, "I was 10 years old. Nothing was promised. I do not know you." He was quiet, and then he said the thing that told me everything. He said, "She told me you would say this. She told me your father has filled your head with American ideas, but a promise is a promise." She had coached him. She had scripted my refusal for him in advance, so that when it came, he would hear it as proof instead of as an answer. I hung up and sat on my bed with the phone face down on my knee until the room went dark around me. Faye came over that evening without calling first, still in her jacket with her car keys in her hand, and my dad let her in, and she came straight up the stairs and sat down on the floor next to me with our shoulders touching. She did not ask what happened. She did not tell me it was going to be fine. After a long while, she turned her head and said, "What do you need?" 4 words, and they went through me sideways, because in 6 years, not one person had asked me that. Everybody had been asking what we should do, which is a completely different question, and the answer to it had always been another lock on another door. I sat there and thought about it honestly for the first time, and somewhere in that hour, I finally saw the actual shape of the thing. Every wall we had built was a wall around me. Locks, blocked numbers, an unlisted phone, my dad standing in doorways. All of it was defense, and defense does not end anything. It just moves the pressure around. Noel had exactly one asset left, and it was not the receipts, and it was not the deeds. It was that she was the only person in this story who knew all of it. Ulrich did not know she had been told no for 6 straight years. Ulrich did not know the money he handed over was gone. His family did not know their land was sitting under a debt she could not pay. The town did not know. Every person in that town knew a version of this story that she had written herself, and she could keep writing it forever because she was the only one holding the pen. So I stopped defending, and I started copying. I photographed every page she had spread across our dining table, every receipt, every stamped deed, every date, front and back. I had the letter from Ulrich, and I had the English translation somebody in his own town had written for him. I had the photograph of the room. I sat down with my dad, and we called my Aunt Lorna, his cousin, the one relative who had never once passed along a message for Noel, and I asked her to translate 2 pages for me and read them out loud to Ulrich's family in person, in their house, with the copies in her hand. My dad watched me line it all up on the table and said, "You are sure?" I said, "She can survive us saying no. She cannot survive them knowing." Then I asked for one meeting, not at our house and not at her motel. We sat down in a rented room at the community center with my dad beside me and my folder in front of me, and Noel came in first and was already smiling when I walked through the door, because to her my showing up meant she had won. She said, "I knew you would come. You have good sense, even if your father tried to take it out of you." I put my hands flat on the table the way she always did, and I said, "I did not come to negotiate. I came to tell you what is going to happen." And then I did not let her talk. I said, "When I was 10, you took me to a wedding and a girl was dragged to the front of the room by two women while she cried, and I asked you why, and you told me all girls cry. I said, when I was 12, a stranger sent me a wedding dress and a gold bracelet, and you called that a gift. I said, in February, you told my dad on speaker that his family gave you money and land, and that you took it in good faith, and then you told us in our own house that you already spent it. I said, you did not secure my future, you sold it, and then you got on a plane and came here to collect. She said what she always said, that everything she did was for me, that I grew up here so I could not understand, that I thought I was smarter than the women who came before me. Then when that did not move me, she got smaller and softer, and leaned across the table and said she was old, that she did not have many years left, that she held me when I was born and carried me on her back before I could walk. And did I really want this to be the last thing between us? It pulled at me. I am not going to pretend it did not. I sat there and saw the woman who used to braid my hair too tight and laugh when I complained about it, and for a second it hurt so much I could not get a full breath in. Then I remembered the girl at that wedding, her knees going loose, two women hauling her up by the arms, a whole room laughing while my grandmother sat next to me and smiled and told me all girls cry. I said, you watched that happen to somebody's daughter and you decided it was good enough for me. I said, you are my blood, and that is what makes it worse, not better. Her face went blank, not hard, just blank, like a door closing from the inside. And then I said the only thing left to say, which was, Ulrich is going to know all of it by Thursday. I told her Lorna was driving out to his family's house with copies of her own receipts and her own deeds, and the letter he wrote me, and that she was going to sit in their front room and tell them that Noel had been refused for 6 years, that Noel had spent their money, that the girl in the photograph had never once agreed to anything, and that a room with white walls had been painted for somebody who was never coming. I said, you can call them first if you want. That is the only choice you have left. She did not answer me. She looked past me at my dad, the way she had for 6 years, betting there was still a boy in there who could not tell his mother no. My dad said, she said it better than I ever did. Go home. Tell them the truth before somebody else does. I stood up and walked out first, and did not look back. Noel did not call them. My dad, Dominic, drove past that motel twice on his way home from work, and told me both times that her rental was still parked outside room 11 with a week of dust on the windshield. She sat in that motel room for 3 more days with the phone right there on the nightstand, while Lorna drove out to that house with a folder in her hands, and it went exactly the way I thought it would, because information is heavier than anybody expects. Lorna called us from her car on the way back and told my dad how it went, and he put her on speaker on purpose this time. She said she read the dates out twice because Ulrich's father asked her to read them again. She said his mother left the room and came back with their own copy of the agreement and set it on the table next to ours, and then nobody said anything for almost a full minute. She said Ulrich did not argue with one word of it. He asked exactly one question. He asked how old the girl was when the picture of the room was taken, and Lorna told him 15, and he stood up and walked outside and did not come back in the whole time she was there. Ulrich's father did the arithmetic on the dates out loud, twice, and then a third time with a pencil. Ulrich had read the part where I did not learn his name until I was 16. By the end of that week, there was no promise, because a promise needs 2 families believing the same thing, and now only one of them did. His family did not want me. They wanted their land back, and they wanted the whole town to know they had been made fools of by a woman they had trusted with their son. Noel flew home 9 days later without telling us. She returned what she could and signed papers for the rest, and she is going to be paying it back for the rest of her life. She told everybody who would listen that my father had turned his back on his family and made it impossible. She never told them a 16-year-old girl put her own folder together and sent it across an ocean, because saying that out loud would mean saying she had been beaten by the person she had already sold. Ulrich never called again. In November, a small envelope came with no letter in it, just the photograph, sent back. I keep it in the folder with everything else. White walls, a single bed, a glass vase on the wooden table, the flowers in it gone brown and folded over.